Greetings, colleagues. My name is Allia Abdullah-Matta, and I teach in the English department. Dr. Anita Baksh and I had the opportunity to lead a Center for Teaching and Learning CTL Inclusive Pedagogy seminar focused on women, gender, and sexuality studies, integrating a feminist pedagogy and process. Our vision for the seminar was to introduce and frame some of the field's critical concepts and terms as entry points to using WGS as a site of critical inquiry and analysis. Further, we wanted to create a seminar space that honored the use of WGS as a pedagogy and praxis, would facilitate an ongoing discussion with college-wide colleagues about interdisciplinary teaching methods, and enabled our colleagues to share and produce effective methods to integrate a feminist pedagogy and process. As part of our seminar design, we focused on several key questions, one of which was, what does it mean to frame an intersectional analysis and a teaching practice that considers or centers WGS? The following lesson is my answer to this question and reflects one of the ways to implement and think about employing a feminist pedagogy when teaching literature. Using women, gender, and sexuality studies as a critical lens can allow students to engage in an interdisciplinary and contextual reading and analysis of literary text. In particular, I use intersectionality as a frame and or anchor concept that enables students to assess and analyze how race, class, gender, sexuality, and other relevant social identity categories enter into textual and contextual analysis. To begin this process, I introduced Kimberly Crenshaw and her analysis. Kimberly Crenshaw introduced the theory of intersectionality, the idea that when it comes to thinking about how inequalities persist, categories like gender, race, and class are best understood as overlapping and mutually constitutive rather than isolated and distinct. For students, it is useful to begin with a dictionary definition. Intersectionality represents, quote, the complex cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups, end quote. I then introduce and frame intersectionality with the watch and write exercise. I show Kimberly Crenshaw's The Urgency of Intersectionality TED Talk. Once the students watch this talk, then we're able to enter into a discussion. Part of that process is to have students take notes during the viewing and then write about the meaning of the Crenshaw's talk, their takeaways, and how she illustrates intersectionality in action. We would then discuss the responses and the significance of intersectionality. The next step is to do intersectionality in practice. And this is also a watch and write exercise. We look at Suhair Hamad's, poet Suhair Hamad's TED Talk. And what's interesting about this talk is that she situates the voice and experiences of particular women in her poem, Break Cluster. Students watch the poem, and then as part of that, they take notes and write about how they experience Hamad and her poetry. We then explore themes of culture, history, war, life, and death, all derived from the context of the poems. And we discuss the ways in which the poem represents an intersectional perspective. Then we do intersectionality in practice too. And all of these stages can be carried out over several class sessions or class assignments. So then we look at Suhair Hamad's poems, and we also read and write. We read and watch, right? So they see the print text of Not Your Exotic, Not Your Erotic, and we also view the YouTube clip of her performing that poem. Students read and watch this piece. They take notes and discuss. They track the themes in the poem about women, culture, history, and objectification. Then we revisit and assemble the text from the previous activities and craft an analytical response that defines intersectionality and that discusses the TED Talks and poems using intersectionality as a critical lens. I think this line in Hamad's poem, I will dance and resist and dance and persist and dance, this heartbeat is louder than death, is a fitting line to think about how the poem captures the experiences and voices of women. Lastly, we do intersectionality in practice. This would be the last part of that, right? And so the analytical response that students create is the result of staging these activities. Students build on an understanding of intersectionality using the context of the Crenshaw talk and the Hamad poems. And then students become practiced in looking for the social categories as they appear in and apply to specific texts. So what I've described is a few staged activities that could lead to a completed written analysis centering intersectionality and using intersectionality as a lens to read and examine poetry. Next steps could be, you could extend this into an intertextual study and a research and writing piece. You can complicate intersectionality by reading the theorists who engage in and advance the discussion and introduce additional literary text, art, and film to show how intersectionality facilitates interdisciplinary analysis and study. So at the end of the seminar, one of the things we did was based on the faculty conversations we had, we were able to share methods and practices. So I hope you enjoyed what I shared with you. Thank you.